We are in section 4 and we are about to check out the 7th video of this section. So in this video, we will see how to create a database helper class and create the singleton object for database as well as database helper class. And then we will write functions to insert, fetch, update and perform delete operation. So here within your application, before you get started, within your pubspec.yaml file, make sure you have all of these dependencies. And now for the database helper class, let us create a new package and name it as utils, and then create a new Dart file and call it as database_helper.dart. Let us create the class of database helper, and now on the top let us import the required packages such as SQFlite plugin, then Dart async package, then Dart.io package to deal with files and folders. Also import the path provider, and finally import this node.dart file. And now let us first declare the singleton object of this database helper class. Well, this database helper instance needs to be in the form of singleton object. Now what exactly I mean by singleton? Well, a singleton object means that this instance will be initialized only once throughout the application. That is, throughout the life cycle of our application, we are going to create only one instance of the database helper class and use it within our application till the application shuts down. And now let us define our factory constructor. Well, when you use the factory keyword for a constructor, so in that case the constructor will allow you to return some value. For example, here I will return the value of this singleton instance, that is the database helper instance. And now let us initialize our object as well. So here I am simply calling a named constructor, which I will define it shortly. Let us copy it and paste it here, and now add a null check here. So this statement simply ensures that we will create the instance of the database helper only if it is null. So this way this statement will only be executed only once within our application. So here let me write the comment statement and here as well. And now it is time to define our singleton database object and then define all the columns of the database along with the database table name. So once you are done with defining the database along with the table name and also the column name, let us now create a function that will help us to execute a statement to create our database. Since I am using await, so here I have just used the async keyword. And now I will write my SQL statement to create our database. So just type along with me. So this statement will help you to create a database with required columns. So make sure you type it as it is. And now I will write a function to initialize our database. So here our first step will be to get the path to the directory for both Android and iOS where we can store our database. So here I will just use directory equal to get application documents directory. Well, this function belongs to the path provider package. And since this function returns the future object, so what we can do, we can just use await keyword and now define the path to our database. Let us give the name to our database as nodesdb. Perfect. And then finally, we have to create the database at this given path, which we are getting it here. So right now what I will do, I will just use the function of open database. And as a path, simply pass path and then give a comma. As a second parameter, pass the version, which will be 1 in our case. And then the third parameter will be the onCreate, where you have to pass this function of createDB. So this will actually execute this function to create our database ultimately. And now on the left, we have to get the reference to our database. And again, here we have to use await and finally return our database. Perfect. And also modify the return type of this function so as to get the better clarity, which will be future database. Perfect. So finally it's time to create the getter For this database reference variable, so down below here, we will use the getter for our database and then return it. Now since our database object will be the singleton, so here I will just use the null check. If it is null, then simply initialize it, else return the older instance. Here I will again use await and then call this function of initialize database, thus completing our code. So whenever you access this database, then it is simply going to create the singleton instance here, which in turn will call this initialize database method, which will actually create or open the database. And to create the database, we have a function down below here, which is getting called from here. Perfect. Thus completing the method chaining. Now our next step, define the functions to perform CRUD operation, such as insert, delete, update, and fetch. So firstly, let us write a fetch operation to get all the node objects from the database. First, get the reference to the database and then perform the query by using db.rawQuery method. So within this, you have to pass a SQL statement to get all the objects from the database. And let us arrange our objects as per the priority in the ascending order. Now there is one alternative to this statement. That is, you can also get the result by using db.justQuery method. You just have to pass the table name as a parameter. And as a second and third parameter, if you notice, within this function, you can pass the column names, where, arguments, group by, and even order by. So as a next parameter, I will pass order by and then provide this part here. Copy it and paste it here. Perfect. So these two statements are basically same. Just that in the first statement, we are writing the raw query. So using SQFlite plugin, you can write queries in two ways. First, by using the raw SQL statement, and the second one will be using the helper function by just passing the parameter. For example, we just saw in case of raw query and also the query method. Similarly, for the insert operation, we can do the same thing. Similarly, for delete and also update operation, we have the same thing. Now you might ask, which one is better? Well, both of them are same. It just depends on your choice or preference. You can use any of these two. Well, I prefer the second one, that is the helper function. Fine. And finally, let us return the result. Now the result will be actually the future of list of map. So here when we query some data from the database, we actually get the list of map in return. Just because, as discussed earlier, the SQFlite plugin deals with only the map objects. So we are going to convert the list of map into the list of nodes later, but right now let it be okay. And now let us perform the insert operation, which will take node object as a parameter, and of course this method will be async. Now here I am just using the helper function of insert. I am not using the raw insert function. And also note that before inserting data to the database, we are first converting it into the map object. And similarly, for the update operation as well, let us write the same kind of function. For the update operation, I will pass few more parameters, such as where to update, where call ID equal to question mark, and also provide the where arguments, which will accept the array. For now, let us pass node ID and then return the result. Perfect. Let us perform the delete operation. For this, I am using the raw delete method. Perfect. Now in the end, I will write one more function to get the number of objects in the database. That is the number of records present within our table. To get the count of the object, we have a special function of SQFlite dot first int value and pass the list of map objects and finally return it. Perfect. So in this way, we have just completed all the functions for fetch operation, insert, update, delete, and also get the number of objects from the database. And also in this video, we just created the singleton objects for our database helper class and also our database class.